You don't get paid to play hero.
The woman said without lifting her eyes, her voice flat and sharp enough to cut glass. Put it back and don't touch private things again. They laughed when the night security guard tried returning a toy from the executive floor. The CEO didn't even look up, called him replaceable, warned him not to touch private property. He didn't argue. He simply placed the music box down and asked her to listen. The instant the tune started, her face drained, like she'd heard a ghost calling her name. Because this isn't about a lost trinket, it's about buried truth and stolen dignity. Before I show you the exact moment when the melody triggered a lockdown audit and the boardroom screens changed, remember this. By the way, where are you watching from? Tell me in the comments below. What looked like a small humiliation was really a fault line opening under power, history grinding awake beneath polished floors. The guard didn't flinch when the laughter tapered into awkward silence. He stood straight, hands still, eyes steady, as if he'd expected the room to tilt and already knew how to keep his balance. Calm settled over him not like surrender, but like control reclaimed. He nodded once, a small, respectful motion that somehow refused to shrink. He worked nights because daylight was reserved for school runs, piano lessons, and reheated dinners eaten together. He wore the uniform because it paid rent, kept the lights on, and gave his daughter something solid to lean against. The job asked him to watch doors others forgot, to stand where power never looked. He accepted that without bitterness. What he didn't accept was being careless with other people's history. After the executives drifted away, murmuring about meetings and schedules, the building exhaled into its nighttime rhythm. Elevators whispered. Vents hummed. Somewhere far above, rain ticked against glass. The guard returned to his post, logging the incident with clean, precise notes that said nothing of pale faces or shaking hands. He logged what mattered and left the rest to memory. Maribel Thorne remained in the executive lounge longer than planned. Her fingers hovered above the music box, never touching it again. The tune still rang in her ears, a sequence she'd ordered erased years ago, a marker she'd sworn no one could ever trace. She told herself it was coincidence. She told herself the man at the desk was irrelevant. Yet her pulse refused to slow. On the labor floors below, cameras rolled and lights dimmed on schedule. The guard moved through his rounds with practiced ease, fixing a jammed door sensor, resetting a flickering monitor, noticing details others missed because noticing had once been his profession. He didn't look at the music box again. He didn't need to. The melody was already awake. By morning, a junior compliance officer named Jonas Pell would open a dashboard that shouldn't have changed. By afternoon, an alert would quietly replicate itself across systems meant to stay dormant. None of that happened yet. What happened now was simpler and more dangerous. A woman in power realized a past she buried had learned how to knock. When the guard clocked out, dawn was thinning the dark. He stepped into the chill, shoulders heavy but spine unbowed. At home, his daughter slept curled around a notebook of staff lines and penciled notes. He set the music box on the counter, unopened, and watched light crawl across its worn edges. He made coffee. He planned breakfast. And he waited because some truths don't chase. They let the powerful come to them. He locked the door behind him and leaned there a second, breathing through the quiet. The city was waking, but the building still belonged to people like him, people who kept things running while others slept. In his pocket, his phone buzzed once, then stopped. No message. Just a system check ping he hadn't seen in years. At breakfast, he packed a lunch with hands, the same way he'd once assembled plans that couldn't afford mistakes. Outside, traffic grew teeth. He glanced at the counter again, at the small wooden box that had crossed a line without moving an inch. It wasn't leverage. It wasn't a weapon. It was proof waiting for the right room. Back at the tower that night, he signed in as usual. A cleaner nodded. A technician complained about rain. Above them, lights burned in offices that promised answers and delivered pressure. He took his post where glass met shadow and let the cameras do their quiet work. Somewhere, a woman rehearsed denials. Somewhere else, a system remembered what it had been taught. And between them stood a man who understood that dignity, once touched, doesn't go back to sleep. Quietly. The night swallowed the tower again, and he stepped back into the rhythm he knew well. The guard signed in, clipped his badge, and felt the quiet settle around him like armor. Cameras blinked awake. Doors sealed. Somewhere above, the executive floors hummed with unfinished conversations and fear that hadn't learned its name yet. He checked his phone while the system booted. No messages from school, no alerts from the landlord, just a single calendar reminder for a parent-teacher meeting he couldn't miss. That mattered more than whatever tension clung to the building. Still, when the elevator chimed and slid open, his shoulders tightened on instinct alone. Maribel Thorne didn't step out. Instead, 2 members of corporate security did, suits too sharp for night work, eyes already measuring him. They asked procedural questions, nothing overt, but their tone carried assumption. He answered cleanly, without defensiveness, and logged their presence like any other anomaly. When they left, one of them glanced back as if trying to remember his face. The hours stretched. He walked his route, boots soft on polished floors, senses tuned to the building's breath. A sensor blinked amber near the executive archive, then corrected itself. He made a note. Not because it was alarming, but because patterns mattered. They always had. At home earlier, the music box had stayed closed. He'd explained to his daughter that some things weren't toys, even if they played songs. She'd accepted that with the quiet trust that made his chest ache. Tonight, the memory of her nod followed him like a promise he couldn't break. Near midnight, a notification slid across his screen. An internal audit ping routed through a channel long retired. He didn't react outwardly. He checked the timestamp, verified the checksum, and archived a copy where it wouldn't be overwritten. This wasn't curiosity. It was caution earned the hard way. Jonas Pell appeared an hour later, breathless in the hallway, clutching a tablet like a shield. He stopped too close, then corrected himself, eyes darting to the cameras. He whispered that something was wrong with the dashboards, that records were surfacing with identifiers nobody used anymore. The guard listened, asked 2 clarifying questions, and told him to document everything before speaking to anyone else. By the way, he added gently as Jonas hesitated, if you're still here watching how this plays out, subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. It was said lightly, almost as a joke, but the truth beneath it felt heavy. This wasn't over. It was beginning. Jonas nodded, steadied, and disappeared toward compliance. The guard resumed his post, pulse. Above him, Maribel Thorne convened a late call, voice tight as she ordered containment. She spoke of risk and optics, never of names. She didn't need to. Systems responded faster than people when fear pressed the right keys. Another alert chimed, softer this time. He traced its path without touching it, mapping where it had been and where it would go. Someone had underestimated the redundancy built into old frameworks. Someone had forgotten that erasure left shadows. As dawn approached, rain intensified, drumming against the glass like fingers demanding entry. He brewed coffee in the break room, steam fogging the window, and let the warmth ground him. The city would wake soon. His daughter would need breakfast and reassurance. He would give both. When his shift ended, he filed his report and clocked out. No mention of melodies or panic. Just facts, and arranged to withstand scrutiny. Outside, the sky lightened, and his phone vibrated again. This time with a message from Jonas. They're calling an early review, board level. He paused under the awning, rain misting his jacket, and allowed himself a single breath of acknowledgement. The building behind him loomed, unaware it was already changing. He turned toward home, carrying nothing visible, certain of only one thing. Truth, once rooted, doesn't ask permission to arrive. He walked the last blocks instead of taking the bus, letting the rain wash the night from him. Each step steadied his thoughts. He would keep routines intact, keep his voice calm, keep promises small and unbreakable. That discipline had saved lives once. Now it would save something quieter. At home, he found his daughter awake, wrapped in a sweater, waiting at the table. She asked if the song had finished. He smiled, poured milk, and said some songs take time. She seemed satisfied, humming a fragment that made his chest tighten and then ease. He checked the time, set an alarm, and sat with her until the light felt like choice. When he left that evening, the tower's lobby buzzed earlier than usual. People whispered. Screens refreshed too often. He signed in, steady as ever, and took his place where power never looked, ready to watch the doors that mattered. The lobby buzz thickened as he signed in, badges chiming, eyes skittering away. Screens refreshed too often. Elevators stalled, and whispers threaded the air. He took his post where glass met shadow, steady, watching doors that mattered. Corporate security arrived in pairs, voices low, smiles brittle. They asked about procedures, about logs, about why a night guard had approached the executive lounge. He answered with facts, not feelings, each sentence clipped and complete. One of them leaned closer. "You know that box wasn't yours to handle," he said, like advice. The guard didn't bristle. "Found property protocol applies," he replied, then waited. Silence did the rest. From the mezzanine, Maribel Thorne watched the exchange through glass that reflected only her composure. She instructed her team to escalate quietly, to review access and isolate variables. Inside, the melody looped, unforgiving. He resumed rounds, fixing a flicker in camera 7, resetting a bulky reader with practiced fingers. The building's sounds lined up again. Order returned where it could. Near the archive corridor, a light pulsed amber, then green. He noted the timestamp, copied the hash, and moved on. Patterns whispered when listened to correctly. Jonas appeared again, pale but focused. "They're blaming facilities," he murmured. "They're saying negligence." The guard shook his head once. "Document everything," he said. "Don't editorialize." Upstairs, Maribel pressed harder, issuing holds and rehearsing statements that sounded reasonable. She avoided the box. She avoided the tune. Power narrowed her choices without admitting it. The night thinned. Coffee steamed in the break room, bitter and grounding. He thought of breakfast plans, of a small hand-tapping rhythm on the table. He kept working. An alert propagated, soft but insistent, touching nodes long retired. He didn't touch the keyboard. He watched, mapped, remembered. Redundancy was a promise, not a flaw. Security returned near dawn, requesting signatures, offering reassurances. He signed what was accurate and declined the rest. "We'll be in touch," they said. "You always are," he answered. Outside, rain eased into mist. His phone vibrated once with a compliance thread marked urgent. He didn't open it yet. He walked home, keeping the day intact. Morning routines held, lunch packed, shoes tied, a promise kept. At the door, he paused, listening to the building's echo in his head, then stepped back into the city. By evening, the lobby was louder, clustered with suits and questions. Screens cycled error codes, then cleared. He signed in again, present, unremarkable, unavoidable. A facilities manager snapped about timelines. A vice president demanded certainty. The guard watched doors open and close, counting breaths. He belonged to the hinge moments. Jonas slipped a folder onto the desk, eyes bright now. "They can't erase this," he said, almost smiling. The guard didn't smile back. "Not yet," he said. Above them, Maribel finalized a narrative that blamed process, not people. She practiced calm, she practiced distance. The past pressed closer anyway. Night deepened, the building listened. He logged another anomaly, small but precise, and felt the arc tightening. Exposure required patience, and patience he had. He thought of the music box resting at home, unopened, waiting. Objects remembered better than people. Systems did too. Security called it a quiet night. It wasn't. It was alignment, pieces clicking where denial had ruled. He stood watch, letting time do its work. Near midnight, a board notice scheduled an emergency review. Names populated the list. His didn't. That omission mattered. Witnesses were being gathered without realizing it. He adjusted the camera angle by a degree, catching the corridor and the glass. Light flared, then settled. Evidence preferred clarity. Jonas texted a single word. "Ready." He replied with none. Silence, again, did the rest. Maribel watched metrics dip and blamed noise. She ordered tighter control, unaware the room was filling. Control shrank as eyes multiplied. The guard checked the time, then the doors, then the people passing through them. He recognized the moment for what it was, the hinge creaking. Rain returned outside, a soft insistence. Inside, the building held its breath. He stayed still, letting the next step come to him. A message arrived marked confidential, routed cleanly. He archived it, untouched, a mirror for later. The path was set. From the mezzanine, Maribel finally looked down at the desk below. For a moment, their eyes met through glass and distance. She looked away first. He logged out at shift's end, precise as ever. Outside, the city murmured. Tomorrow would be louder. He walked home, ready. The music box waited on the counter. He didn't open it. He didn't have to. Some doors open themselves when enough eyes are watching. He set the alarm, checked the locks, and slept lightly. Systems hummed. Truth kept time. Morning would arrive with witnesses, and nothing would stop it now, not power, fear, not silence. Morning arrived without ceremony. He woke before the alarm, the room gray and still, the city holding its breath. For a moment he listened to the quiet, then moved, careful not to wake his daughter. Coffee bloomed in the kitchen, bitter and grounding, while he checked his phone. Notifications stacked without urgency, the kind that pretended nothing was wrong. He packed lunches, tied laces, and kept his voice soft. At the table, she hummed, fingers tapping a rhythm he recognized without placing. He smiled, asked about school, promised to be early. When the door closed behind them, the quiet returned, heavier now, like a held note. He locked up and walked, letting the morning traffic braid around him. The tower looked unchanged from the outside, glass clean, flags still. Inside, it was already different. Security lines were longer, voices carried, screens refreshed and refreshed again. He signed in, nodded to the cleaner, took his place. People passed without seeing him except when they did, and then they looked twice. A facilities director approached, flanked by an assistant with a tablet. Questions came faster than yesterday, still polite, still angled. He answered once, then pointed to the log. The director frowned, not at him, but at the precision. "We'll circle back," she said. He nodded, already circling forward. Jonas hovered near compliance, eyes bright with sleep he hadn't had. He handed over a badge request stamped urgent and whispered that the board had called an early review, auditors included. The guard listened, then asked where the request routed. Jonas blinked. "Through Legacy," he said. The guard's jaw set, almost a smile. "Good," he said. "Legacy remembers." Above them, Maribel Thorne convened her morning call with practiced calm. She spoke of alignment and transparency, of proactive review. She did not speak of the tune. She assigned blame to processes that could not defend themselves. When someone suggested pausing operations, she cut them off, voice cool. Control was a language she spoke fluently, even as it slipped. He made his rounds, noticing small things. A door that closed half a second slower. A badge reader that hesitated, then accepted. A camera angle someone had nudged, not enough. He corrected what needed correcting and logged what needed light. He belonged to the edges, and edges told the truth. Mid-morning brought visitors, suits with accents, auditors with neutral smiles. They clustered near reception, badges catching light. He watched the flow, counted steps, noted who avoided whose eyes. Witnesses were assembling without being told they were witnesses. Jonas returned with a folder thicker than yesterday's, breath steadier. "They tried to pin it on maintenance," he said. "Didn't stick?" The guard scanned the cover, then slid it back. "Keep copies," he said. "2 places." Jonas nodded, absorbing the cadence. A message pinged the desk, routed cleanly, time-stamped years ago and today at once. He didn't open it. He archived it, untouched. Evidence aged like wine when handled right. By noon, the lobby buzzed with rumor. Someone said an archive had rehydrated. Someone else said a donor was angry. He kept his posture easy, eyes moving, hands still. When security passed again, their questions softened. Respect crept in sideways. Maribel stepped into the elevator, jaw tight, heels decisive. Through glass and reflection, she saw the desk below and the man at it. She looked away, pressed a button harder than necessary. Power hated mirrors. Lunch came and went. He ate quickly, texted a reminder about homework, pocketed the phone. Outside, clouds thickened. Inside, the building warmed with bodies and attention. Screens in a side corridor flickered, then steadied. He logged the flicker. An auditor approached late afternoon, asking for access logs from the previous night. He provided them without comment. The auditor raised an eyebrow at the completeness. "You keep good records," she said. He shrugged. "It's the job." As evening neared, a board notice posted, "Public now." Names populated the list, not his. He watched people read it, faces shifting. Jonas caught his eye and nodded once. The guard checked the time, then the doors, then the people flowing between them. The hinge creaked. He stayed where power never looked, letting alignment finish its quiet work. Outside, thunder rolled. Inside, the building listened. He stood watch, unremarkable, unavoidable, as the room filled with eyes and the past cleared its throat. Thunder lingered as evening settled in, the air heavy with something close to expectation. He remained at the desk while the lobby rearranged itself around the arriving guests. Jackets loosened, voices lowered, shoes clicked with purpose. A gala had been scheduled weeks ago, a donor event meant to project confidence. Tonight, it felt like a test run for denial. He checked badges, guided traffic, watched the flow compress toward the atrium. Light spilled down from the upper levels, warm and flattering, smoothing over tension for those who believed lighting could solve anything. He belonged to the shadow at the edge, where reflections broke and truth slipped through. Maribel Thorne arrived last, smile calibrated, posture flawless. She greeted donors by name. He accepted compliments, radiated control. The building responded, screens syncing, music swelling. He didn't move when she passed. She didn't look at him. At the center of the atrium, a presentation wall came alive with numbers meant to soothe. Applause followed, polite and practiced. A donor stepped forward to offer a gift for auction, an antique music box, restored, its wood polished to a gentle sheen. The room murmured approval. He felt the shift before the tune began. The donor wound the key. The melody rose, unmistakable, threading through glass and bodies. Conversation stalled. Maribel's smile froze, then faltered. Color drained from her face, as if the sound pulled it away. Screens behind her flickered once, then twice, then changed. A soft alert chimed, almost polite. Lines of text replaced the presentation. Headers marked with identifiers nobody used anymore. A few guests laughed, thinking it was a glitch. Others leaned in, reading, whispers sharpened. He stayed still. He logged the time. Maribel raised a hand, laughter tight. She gestured for technicians, for security, for anything that could put the room back where it had been. The melody finished its phrase and stopped. Silence spread, thick and curious. Jonas stood near the compliance table, eyes wide, tablet trembling in his hands. He caught the guard's gaze, then looked back at the screens as if seeing them for the first time. An auditor stepped forward, asking what the identifiers meant. No one answered quickly enough. The wall refreshed again, pulling files long buried into clean view. Dates aligned. Names appeared. The donor lowered the box, confused. "This was my father's," he said to no one in particular. He said it was proof. The guard inhaled once and let it out. This was the room. This was public enough. Security surged, trying to reroute guests, to dim the wall. The wall refused. Someone tried to mute the feed. It replicated to secondary displays, then tertiary. Redundancy did what it had been built to do. Maribel's voice cut through, controlled but sharp. She ordered a pause, promised clarification. The auditors exchanged looks. One of them asked for logs. Another asked who authorized the identifiers. The answers tangled. From his place at the desk, he guided a small cluster toward exits, keeping calm where panic wanted in. He didn't speak to the wall. He didn't need to. Systems recognized their own. "By the way," he said quietly to a guest who lingered, "if you're following this, subscribe so you don't miss what happens next." The line landed soft, almost human humor, but the truth beneath it pressed forward. This wasn't a moment. It was a sequence. The donor set the music box on a nearby table, hands unsteady. An assistant tried to move it. The donor stopped her. "Leave it," he said. "It's done enough." Jonas approached, breath quick. "They're asking for you," he murmured. The guard shook his head. "Not yet," he said. "Let them ask the room first." The atrium buzzed with questions that couldn't be ushered away. Phones rose. Screenshots flew. Someone laughed, too loud. Someone else swore. Maribel retreated a step, recalibrating, eyes searching for a lever that wasn't there. An auditor read a header aloud, voice even. A hush followed. The past had learned to project. The guard checked his log and added a line. Public display replicated. Witnesses present. He initialed it and closed the book. Outside, rain hammered the glass. Inside, the building listened to itself. The gala had become something else entirely, and no amount of polish could turn it back. Maribel met his gaze across the space at last. Her eyes flicked to the desk, to the logs, to the exits. She understood now that containment required cooperation she didn't have. He straightened a stack of pamphlets and waited. This part wasn't his to rush. Exposure moved best when allowed to breathe. The wall refreshed again, patient as stone. The music box sat untouched, a small wooden anchor in a sea of light. When the first guest left, shaking his head, the guard marked the time. The sequence had crossed its threshold, and nothing here would be handled quietly again. The atrium didn't empty so much as reorganize. Guests clustered in knots, voices pitched low, eyes darting between the frozen screens and Maribel Thorne, who stood perfectly still as if movement itself might be an admission. He remained at the desk, posture easy, logging the shift from event to incident without letting his hand betray the weight of it. Auditors took control of the space with polite authority. One asked for access credentials. Another requested a quiet room. Security hovered, uncertain whom to listen to. The wall refreshed again, patient and relentless, surfacing timelines that refused to blur. Jonas slipped back to the desk, face flushed. "They're pulling legacy audit chains," he whispered. "Full visibility." The guard nodded once. "Then don't speculate," he said. "Let the records speak." Maribel attempted to recover the room, voice smooth, offering explanations that sounded reasonable if you didn't read. She blamed a vendor, then a misconfiguration, then an old migration artifact. Each answer satisfied no one for long. The auditors asked for corroboration. Screens provided it. A technician tried to power cycle a display. It came back with more. Someone swore softly. The donor who'd brought the music box stood off to the side, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the identifiers scrolling past. "Those dates," he said to an auditor. "That's when my father stopped returning calls." The guard guided traffic away from the choke point, keeping exits clear. He felt the building's hum deepen, like a held breath finally finding rhythm. When Jonas returned again, tablet clutched tight, the guard saw the moment land. "They traced the identifier," Jonas said. "It's not random, it's a case tag." He swallowed. "Your case tag." The guard's jaw set, almost imperceptible. He glanced at the wall, then back at Jonas. "Not here," he said. "Not yet." He reached under the desk and slid a thin folder across, unlabeled. "Open that in compliance," he added. "Alone." Jonas hesitated, then nodded, eyes sharp with understanding. He moved quickly, purposeful now. Across the atrium, Maribel watched the exchange and stiffened, recognizing momentum she couldn't command. An auditor approached the desk, courteous and direct. "We'll need your logs," she said. He handed them over without flourish. She scanned a page, then another. "You keep meticulous records," she said. "Someone had to," he replied. The wall refreshed again, pulling a summary view that made the room quiet. Names aligned, approvals stacked. A single signature repeated where it shouldn't. Maribel's hand tightened on her glass. She set it down carefully, as if noise might fracture the room. In compliance, Jonas opened the folder. Inside were timestamps, governance maps, and a single note written years ago, precise and spare. He read it twice, breath catching. The note described safeguards designed to survive deletion, anchored to an external artifact for verification. A melody, a physical key, proof that lived outside systems until called home. Jonas closed the folder and leaned back, stunned. He understood now why containment failed. He understood why the identifiers kept returning. He understood who had built the trap and why. Back in the atrium, Maribel was ushered toward a side room, two auditors flanking her with professional sympathy that didn't slow their pace. Cameras rose, phones buzzed. The donor refused to leave the music box behind, cradling it like an heirloom and a verdict. The guard logged another line, steady. He felt the urge to move, to explain, to end it. He didn't. Public exposure required patience and witnesses, not speeches. Jonas reappeared, eyes bright and frightened. He nodded once, sharp. The guard returned it. That was enough. Security attempted to cordon off the wall. The wall replicated again, now mirrored to a hallway display where more eyes gathered. The building had learned to speak to itself. Maribel's voice rose from behind closed glass, controlled but tight. She demanded privacy. The auditors nodded and kept writing. The guard checked the time. He thought of dinner plans, of a child's humming, of promises that mattered. He straightened a stack of forms and waited. When the auditors returned, one asked a question that shifted the room. "Who designed the redundancy?" she said, not accusing, simply curious. Silence spread. Maribel stared at the table. Jonas looked at the desk. The guard didn't answer. He logged the question and the time it was asked. The building hummed, satisfied. The sequence had reached its center. The rest would be visible, whether anyone wanted it or not. He stood where power never looked, hands still, letting the room decide what to see next. The question lingered longer than any accusation could have. Who designed the redundancy? It hung in the atrium like a held note, vibrating against glass and polished stone. No one answered it out loud. Not yet. The auditors exchanged looks, pens pausing mid-stroke, eyes tracking the silence itself. Maribel Thorne emerged from the side room composed but diminished, as if the air had learned her outline and decided to press back. She adjusted her jacket, thanked the auditors for their diligence, and announced a temporary suspension of the event due to technical irregularities. The words landed flat. Too many people were already reading. He guided a small group toward the exit, calm and courteous, his body language easing panic without inviting conversation. Phones were out now, angled carefully, capturing screens, faces, fragments of authority cracking. He logged the crowd density, the exits cleared, the time. Witnesses mattered more than applause. Security leadership regrouped near the desk, voices low, glances sharp. One of them asked for his badge again, as if the plastic rectangle might explain things. He handed it over, waited, took it back. Procedure held where bluster failed. Jonas hovered at the edge of compliance, eyes bright with adrenaline and fear. He mouthed a single word. Confirmed. The guard nodded, barely. Confirmation changed nothing and everything at once. Upstairs, an emergency notice went live to internal channels, urging discretion. It arrived seconds too late. Screenshots had already outrun it. The building's hum shifted. A deeper register now, like machinery finding load. Maribel retreated to her office with advisors, voice clipped, issuing directives that sounded firm until they met the wall. She ordered a personnel review. She ordered access freezes. She ordered silence. The systems complied selectively, honoring the oldest rules first. An HR representative approached the desk with a practiced smile and a printed notice. Administrative leave, pending review, effective immediately. The guard read it once, then folded it neatly. Understood, he said. He logged the interaction, time-stamped, initials clear. The HR rep hesitated. "You'll be escorted," she added, softer. He shook his head. "I know the way," he said, not unkind. Security glanced at each other, then stepped aside. Power didn't argue when the room was watching. He packed his locker slowly, methodical as ever. Boots, jacket. A photo tucked behind a manual. He left the space clean. When he stepped back into the lobby, eyes followed him with a new weight. Not pity, not admiration. Recognition still forming. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the city damp and reflective. He walked, shoulders steady, and the tower receding behind him. His phone buzzed twice. One message from Jonas with a string of encrypted attachments. Another from the school reminding him of a recital. He smiled despite himself. At home, he found his daughter at the piano, feet not quite reaching the pedals, brow furrowed in concentration. She played the fragment she'd been humming all morning, missing a phrase, then stopping to think. He listened from the doorway, letting the sound settle his breath. "They said I did good," she said without looking up. "You always do," he replied. He washed his hands, started dinner, kept the routine intact. Stability was a language he spoke fluently. Later, when she slept, he opened the attachments Jonas sent. Logs, maps, approvals, the redundancy chain intact and undeniable. He didn't forward them. He archived them. Timing mattered. Across town, Maribel convened a late call, voice tight, anger leaking through control. She blamed him by role, by title, by absence. She avoided names. Names carried weight. Morning came too quickly. He walked her to school, listened to excited chatter, promised to be there that evening. He watched her disappear through the doors, then turned back toward the city. The news cycle had begun to chew. Headlines hedged. Analysts speculated. The company released a statement heavy on reassurance and light on detail. It satisfied no one. By afternoon, Jonas called. "They're setting a formal hearing," he said. "Board and auditors, public minutes." The guard closed his eyes once, then opened them. "I'll attend if invited," he said. "Good," Jonas replied. "They can't avoid it now." He spent the evening preparing meals, laying out clothes, checking calendars. Ordinary tasks anchored extraordinary days. When his daughter asked why he was home early again, he told her the truth he could afford. "Work is changing," he said. She nodded, trusting. As night fell, messages multiplied, some supportive, some sharp. He answered none. Silence, again, did the rest. In a corner office, Maribel stared at the city lights and rehearsed defenses. She told herself she could still steer this. She told herself the man with the badge was gone. She was wrong, because removal wasn't erasure. And the room was still watching. The formal invitation arrived just after dawn, clipped and procedural, as if tone alone could neutralize consequence. He read it once, noted the time, and placed it beside the kettle. The board and auditors would convene that afternoon. Public minutes. Open attendance. The room had decided it wanted witnesses. He walked his daughter to school under a clearing sky, the air washed clean by last night's rain. She talked about timing and counting measures, about how pauses mattered as much as notes. He smiled because she was right, and because she had no idea how much. At the doors, she hugged him hard and ran off without looking back. Preparation wasn't about speeches. It was about order. Back home, he laid out the materials Jonas had sent, spreading them across the table in quiet rows. Logs aligned with approvals. Maps matched timestamps. Redundancy chains closed their own loops. He didn't annotate. He didn't highlight. He trusted the structure to do what it had been built to do. Jonas called mid-morning, voice steadier than it had ever been. "They're trying to narrow scope," he said. "Limit discussion to process failures." The guard listened, then asked a single question about agenda placement. Jonas laughed once, short and surprised. "You're on it," he said. "Late, but unavoidable." "If anyone asks," the guard said, "tell them I'm not bringing anything new." Jonas paused. "That's true," he said. "It's all already there. By the way, if you're following this and want to see how it unfolds, subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. This isn't just about a hearing. It's about what happens when systems remember who they were built to protect." He dressed simply, the same jacket he wore to work, the one with enough pockets to be practical and none that signaled importance. On the way out, he paused at the counter where the music box sat. He didn't open it. He placed it carefully into a bag and zipped it closed. Proof traveled best when treated like any other object. The hearing space was a converted conference hall, glass on 3 sides, sunlight flattening nothing. Auditors set up at one end, board members at another, legal counsel arranged like a buffer. Seats filled with staff, press, and donors who hadn't been asked to leave this time. He took a chair near the back and waited. Maribel Thorne entered to a low murmur, posture immaculate, eyes forward. She didn't look for him. She didn't need to. The room had already mapped him. The chair called the meeting to order, outlined scope, emphasized professionalism. The first questions addressed process, migrations, vendors. Answers flowed smoothly until they didn't. Screens displayed timelines that resisted simplification. Names repeated. A signature appeared too often. When asked about redundancy, an executive deflected. An auditor followed up, precise. The room leaned in. Jonas sat rigid, hands folded, eyes on the table. The guard stood only when invited. He moved to the table without hurry, set the bag down, and waited for permission. When it came, he opened it and placed the music box in the center. Not dramatically, just where everyone could see it. "This artifact," an auditor said carefully, "is referenced in the records." He nodded. "It anchors the verification," he said, voice even. He didn't explain further. He didn't need to. Maribel's jaw tightened. She interjected, framing the object as sentimental, irrelevant. The auditor asked when the case tag had been closed. Maribel answered with a date. The wall displayed another. Silence followed. Then questions came faster. He responded only when asked, and only with facts. He described how redundancy survived deletion, how external anchors prevented silent erasure, how governance required transparency to function. He avoided names unless prompted. When prompted, he answered. Maribel attempted to reframe, to question authority without appearing to. The room resisted. Witnesses watched the structure hold. Jonas was called next. He spoke clearly, referencing documents already visible. He didn't speculate. He didn't editorialize. The auditors nodded. At the end, the chair asked a final question, careful and public. "Who designed the system?" All eyes turned. He answered with his name once, calmly, and sat back down. The room exhaled. Outside, cameras waited. Inside, minutes were recorded. The sequence completed another step, clean and irreversible. He packed the music box away and returned to his seat. Whatever happened next would happen in daylight. And for the first time since the tune had played, the room didn't look away. The room didn't erupt after his name landed. It tightened instead, like a muscle recognizing strain. Pens scratched faster, screens refreshed, obedient now, no longer surprised by what they showed. The chair thanked him and moved the agenda forward, but the air had changed. Everyone felt it. Maribel Thorne adjusted her posture, recalibrating again. She spoke with care, acknowledging his role without validating it, praising safeguards while distancing herself from their origin. The auditors listened without interruption. When she finished, one of them asked for the authorization trail that led to the system's partial decommissioning. Maribel hesitated for half a second too long. Jonas watched the hesitation register across faces. He'd learned, in the last 48 hours, what timing could do. He didn't speak, he didn't need to. The trail appeared on the wall, clean and chronological. A decision memo, a directive, a signature. The same one, again. A donor in the second row inhaled sharply. A reporter leaned forward. The chair requested quiet. Maribel objected, framing context, invoking urgency, citing competitive pressures from years ago. She spoke of survival and leadership, of necessary cuts. The auditors acknowledged context and returned to sequence. Context didn't change timestamps. The guard stayed seated, hands folded, listening. He felt the urge to clarify, to correct a small mischaracterization, and let it pass. Precision worked best when it wasn't crowded. When the auditors broke for a brief recess, with the room buzzed, contained but loud enough to carry, he stepped into the corridor, keeping to the edge. Jonas followed, eyes alight with something like relief. "They're done narrowing," he said. "It's open now." The guard nodded. "Good," he said. "Then let it be open." A reporter approached with a question and a microphone. He declined politely and logged the interaction on his phone, habit guiding hand. Witnesses mattered. So did boundaries. Inside, Maribel conferred with counsel, voice low, jaw tight. She avoided looking toward the corridor. She knew the next phase would be about responsibility, not architecture. Architecture had held. The recess ended. The chair reconvened and announced the scope expansion, formally for the record. Public minutes would reflect it. Cameras whirred. The wall displayed the updated agenda. Questions turned to impact. Who had been affected? Which investigations stalled? Which safeguards failed because they'd been muted? The donor with the music box spoke, voice steady now, about calls that stopped and promises that evaporated. Others added fragments. The room assembled a picture no single voice could dismiss. The guard was asked about intent. He answered carefully. He described building systems to protect institutions from short-term decisions that caused long-term harm. He spoke of redundancy as ethics, not insurance. He didn't accuse, he explained. Maribel responded with rhetoric sharpened by years at the helm. She reframed choices as burdens leaders carry. The auditors acknowledged leadership burdens and asked about unilateral authority. Silence pressed in again. Jonas was called back. He presented the compliance perspective, the missed alerts, the overridden flags. He spoke with clarity earned under pressure. The auditors thanked him and requested additional documentation. He provided it. By late afternoon, the chair summarized findings to date, careful and precise. Interim measures were announced, an independent review, temporary delegation of certain authorities. The word suspension hovered, unspoken but close. Maribel's expression didn't change. Her knuckles whitened briefly on the table, then relaxed. She requested a statement for the record, voice steady. It was granted. She spoke of cooperation and confidence, of transparency going forward. The wall displayed another timestamp that undercut the phrasing. No one commented. The minutes would. When the session adjourned, the room exhaled again, louder this time. Conversations overlapped. Reporters surged. He stayed seated until the aisle cleared, then rose and gathered his bag. Jonas caught up near the doors. "They'll ask you to stay involved," he said, "as a consultant, or more." The guard shook his head. "We'll see," he said. "Let tonight finish first." Outside, the sky had shifted toward evening gold. He walked a block before the noise caught up, then another. His phone vibrated with a message from school about tomorrow's rehearsal time. He replied with a thumbs up and kept walking. Across town, Maribel sat in a quiet office, lights dimmed, advisors murmuring options. She stared at the city and thought about the room, about witnesses who hadn't looked away. She told herself she could still shape the outcome. She'd shaped many. At home, the guard set the music box back on the counter. His daughter burst in with stories, music spilling from her words. He listened, grounded, present. Dinner simmered. The day receded. Later, after homework and a practiced piece played cleaner than before, she asked if songs ever ended. He smiled. "They resolve," he said. "Sometimes it takes a while." When the house went quiet, he checked his messages once more. A board notice had posted publicly. Interim measures confirmed. The sequence moved. He turned off the light and let the dark settle. Tomorrow would bring consequences, public and personal. He slept anyway, trusting the structure he'd built to hold one more night. The room had seen enough. Now it would decide what to do with it. Morning came with a different weight, not heavier, just sharper. He woke before the alarm again, listening to the house breathe. The city outside felt alert, like it knew something was about to tip. He made breakfast, packed a lunch, and moved through the familiar motions with deliberate calm. At the table, his daughter practiced silently, fingers ghosting over imagined keys. She asked if he'd be there tonight. He said yes and meant it without qualification. Promises mattered more when the world got loud. By the time he stepped outside, his phone was already warm with notifications he didn't open. The board notice had gone public overnight. Interim authority reassigned. Independent review confirmed. Media requests multiplied. He ignored them all and took the long way to the tower, letting his thoughts line up. The lobby was crowded when he arrived. No badge required this time. Reporters clustered near the walls. Security stretched thin, eyes everywhere. Screens looped statements that said much and admitted little. He paused just inside, absorbing the shift. This building no longer belonged to certainty. An assistant intercepted him, polite and nervous, and guided him toward a smaller conference room off the main hall. Inside, 2 auditors waited, files open, posture neutral. They thanked him for coming and asked if he was willing to clarify technical points for the record. He agreed, sat, folded his hands. Questions came measured and precise. He answered in the same register, careful to stay within scope. He described system intent, not personal grievance. He explained how alerts were designed to escalate beyond individual control, how anchoring to an external artifact prevented quiet deletion. The auditors nodded, pens moving. Outside the room, Maribel Thorne crossed the lobby with counsel in tow. She looked tired now, the effort of composure visible at the edges. When she saw the conference room door close, something unreadable passed over her face. She didn't stop. The auditors asked about remediation. He outlined options without prescribing outcomes. Transparency. Independent oversight, restored checks. He didn't say who should lead them. That wasn't his role. When the session ended, they thanked him again and said they might follow up. He stood, shook hands, and stepped back into the corridor. Cameras swung toward him like sunflowers. He kept his gaze forward and moved through the space without comment. Near the elevators, Jonas waited, shoulders squared, eyes bright. "They're asking everyone the same thing," he said quietly. "Consistency is holding." The guard nodded. "It will," he said, "if you let it." Jonas hesitated, then spoke faster. "They're considering reinstatement publicly with an apology." The guard stopped walking. He turned, expression unreadable. "That's their decision," he said, "not mine." Jonas searched his face, then nodded, understanding settling in. The day stretched into afternoon. A press conference was announced, then delayed, then announced again. Rumors flew faster than facts. He found a quiet bench near the plaza and ate his lunch, watching people hurry past with their eyes glued to screens. Across the street, Maribel sat with advisors in a temporary office, voice low, clipped. She rehearsed language that might salvage authority without admitting intent. Every version sounded thinner than the last. Power didn't like mirrors, and the city was full of glass. When the press conference finally happened, he watched from the edge of the crowd. Statements were read, cooperation emphasized, interim leadership confirmed, questions pressed harder than answers could hold. Maribel spoke once, briefly, and stepped away. The crowd dispersed in waves. He checked the time and headed home, ignoring another call from an unfamiliar number. Tonight mattered. At the apartment, he changed his jacket and helped with homework, listening to a careful recounting of rehearsal notes and missed beats. He nodded, offered encouragement, set plates on the table. Ordinary things steadied extraordinary days. Later, as they walked toward the school auditorium, he felt the day's tension drain with each step. Inside, parents filled seats, programs rustling. He found a place near the aisle and waited. When the music began, it was tentative at first, then stronger. His daughter played with focus, pausing where she should, letting silence work. He felt something loosen in his chest he hadn't realized was tight. Applause rose, honest and warm. He clapped until his hand stung, smiling when she found him in the crowd and grinned back. This was the measure that counted. Outside, night settled gentle and cool. His phone vibrated with a single message from Jonas. "Board meets tomorrow. Final decisions." He pocketed the phone and walked home, listening to excited chatter beside him. The city hummed, unaware of its own turning. He locked the door behind them and set the music box back on the counter, still closed. Tomorrow would open something else entirely. For now, he let the quiet hold. The next morning arrived clean and decisive, as if the city itself had chosen clarity. He woke before the alarm again, not from worry but from habit, and lay still long enough to recognize the difference. The waiting was nearly over. He made breakfast, listened to a sleepy recap of dreams, tied shoelaces, and walked his daughter to school beneath a sky-scrubbed pale blue. At the doors, she paused, hugged him once, and ran inside without looking back. Trust, complete and unburdened. By the time he reached the plaza near the tower, the crowd had already gathered. Cameras, staff, donors. Employees who had never attended a board meeting before but understood that something irreversible was about to happen. The meeting was public now by necessity, streamed and recorded, minutes promised in full. Inside, the boardroom felt different without the usual insulation. Glass walls revealed observers lining the corridor, their reflections layered over executives who shifted in seats not designed for scrutiny. Auditors took their places with neutral authority. Interim leadership sat where certainty used to live. Maribel Thorne entered last. She wore composure like armor, but it no longer fit as well. The room registered it, the way rooms do. She took her seat without greeting, eyes forward, hands folded too tightly. The chair called the meeting to order. Findings were summarized with care and precision. Timelines aligned. Decisions were named. Consequences outlined without flourish. Every word was chosen to survive daylight. He sat among the observers, Not invited to the table this time, not excluded either. Witness. That was enough. When Maribel was asked to respond, she stood slowly, the practiced stillness returning. She spoke of intent and pressure, of responsibility and leadership. She acknowledged errors in judgment without admitting motive. The language was familiar, honed over years of avoiding absolutes. Then an auditor asked one final question, voice even, carrying far in the quiet room. Did you personally authorize the suppression of the safeguards after being advised against it? The question landed cleanly. No ambiguity, no escape. Maribel held the silence longer than she should have. Eyes flicked to counsel, to the board, to the glass walls filled with people who were no longer abstract. For the first time since the melody played, there was nowhere left to rout the truth. Yes, she said. The word didn't echo. It didn't need to. It settled. A murmur rippled through the corridor. Pens moved. Cameras adjusted. The chair thanked her and noted the response for the record. Interim measures advanced to permanent ones. A vote was called. He watched hands rise. Not all at once. Not unanimously. Enough. The decision was read aloud, procedural and devastating. Removal from executive authority pending final resolution. Cooperation required. Public disclosure mandated. The board did not cheer. It didn't need to. Gravity did the work. Maribel closed her eyes briefly, then opened them. She nodded once, a gesture stripped of command, and gathered her papers with care that bordered on reverence. When she stood, she did not look toward the glass. She walked out through a side door, the sound of it closing soft and final. The chair continued, addressing restitution, reform, and oversight. Names were assigned, processes rebuilt, and the language was dense, but the meaning was simple. The system would remember again. When the meeting adjourned, the corridor filled with sound. Reporters surged. Staff spoke in low, disbelieving voices. He stayed where he was until the crowd thinned, then stepped back into the hall. Jonas found him near the elevators, eyes shining, hands shaking now that the work was done. "It's real," he said. "They couldn't outrun it." The guard nodded. "They never can," he said quietly. An interim board member approached, offered thanks, spoke of future roles and restored titles. He listened politely and declined with equal care. "I'm where I need to be," he said. The board member studied him, then nodded, something like respect settling in. Outside, microphones waited. He passed them without stopping. He didn't know the moment to quote, and the record was complete. He walked home through streets buzzing with aftermath. Headlines updated in real time. Notifications stacked and fell away unanswered. When he reached the apartment, the quiet met him like a held breath finally released. His daughter burst in later with news of a surprise rehearsal change, energy bright and unburdened. He listened, cooked, laughed at the right moments. The world had not tilted for her, and that mattered more than anything. After dinner, she practiced again, the piece clean now, pauses confident. He listened from the doorway, leaning against the frame, feeling the long tension drain from his shoulders. When the house settled into sleep, he checked his phone once. The official statement had posted. Accountability named, reforms promised. It would be enough to begin. He turned off the light and let the dark come gently. Tomorrow would bring adjustments, offers, noise. Tonight, dignity had already been restored, not by applause, but by witnesses who didn't look away. The system had done what it was built to do. And so had he. Morning arrived quietly, like it understood the work was finished. He woke to sunlight sliding across the wall, softer than it had been in days, and lay still long enough to feel the difference settle into his bones. The waiting was over. What remained was living with what had changed. He made breakfast without checking his phone. Eggs, toast, the ordinary comforts that had anchored him through everything else. His daughter wandered in half awake, hair wild, asking if today was normal again. He smiled and said yes, because for her it should be. They walked to school together under a sky that felt wider than before. Parents chatted. Cars idled. Nothing about the street announcing that a powerful woman had fallen or that a quiet man had been vindicated. At the doors, she hugged him, then paused. "Did the song help?" she asked. He nodded. "It did," he said. She accepted that answer and ran inside. Back home, the apartment felt lighter. He tidied without hurry, folded laundry, wiped the counter where the music box sat. It remained closed, its purpose complete. Proof didn't need to perform forever. His phone buzzed eventually. Messages from Jonas first, updates, relief, gratitude that spilled out in fragments. Then official emails followed, carefully worded invitations, offers to consult, to return, to be named. He read them all and archived them. Timing still mattered. Near noon, he stepped out for groceries, blending into the city that had already moved on. A stranger recognized him from a clip and nodded once, respectful, no words exchanged. That was enough. He didn't need applause. He needed space to choose. At home, he cooked lunch and listened to the radio mention the board decision in measured tones. Accountability, reform, oversight. The language was familiar now, but it sounded different when it held weight. He turned it off before commentary could thin it out. In the afternoon, Jonas stopped by, shoulders looser than he'd ever seen them. They sat at the small table, coffee steaming between them. Jonas spoke about what came next. Policy rebuilds, cultural shifts, the long work of repair. The guard listened, then said what he'd been holding. "Don't turn this into another performance," he said gently. "Build it so no one needs a melody to wake it up again." Jonas nodded, sober and grateful, and promised he would try. When Jonas left, the apartment fell quiet again. He checked the time and started dinner prep, setting aside a portion for later. Tonight was recital night again, this time informal, parents invited to sit close. He changed his jacket, brushed off the shoulders, and waited. They walked to the auditorium as dusk cooled the air. Inside, chairs scraped, laughter bubbled, programs fluttered. He found a seat near the front and watched his daughter take her place, shoulders squared, fingers ready. She played with confidence now, pauses clean, melody resolved. The fragment that once trailed off found its ending. He felt it in his chest, a soft ache loosening at last. Applause rose, warm and genuine. He clapped until his palms tingled, smiling when she searched the room and found him. Afterward, she ran to him, breathless, asking if she'd done it right. He told her she'd done it honestly. She accepted that as the highest praise and looped her arm through his as they walked home. That night, after homework and laughter and the slow unwinding of a long day, he tucked her in and turned off the light. He stood in the doorway a moment, listening to her breathing even out, and felt the full weight of what he'd protected. In the kitchen, he picked up the music box one last time and turned it over in his hands. He didn't wind it. He placed it back on the counter and left it there, a small wooden reminder that systems, like people, remembered when built to. Before bed, he checked his phone once more. The final statement had been released. Consequences named. Oversight established. No spin left to hide behind. He set the phone down and didn't pick it up again. The city outside hummed, indifferent and alive. Tomorrow would bring work, maybe new work, maybe the same. He would still pack lunches, still walk school halls, still stand where power rarely looked. The difference was that now the room knew he existed. He turned off the light and let the dark settle, peaceful instead of tense. Dignity hadn't arrived as a reward. It had simply been recognized. And now, before we move on, tell me your next story title. Subscribe and don't miss our next story. Rejected on a Christmas blind date, this single dad never expected what one woman whispered next. Trust me, you'll feel it. And tell me in the comments, what injustice should we tackle next?